The lore of Elden Ring begins not with a beginning, but with a monumental fractures, the shattering of the Elden Ring and the subsequent collapse of the lands between. To understand the fall, one must first understand the height from which the world plummeted. The lands between was a realm defined by the Golden Order, a metaphysical system of laws governed by the Elden Ring, a conceptual object housed within the body of Queen Marika, the Eternal. This order was a gift from the Greater Will, an outer god that sought to impose a specific logic upon reality, most notably the removal of destined death. By plucking the rune of death from the ring, Marika ensured a world where life and grace were eternal, but this perfection created a stagnant divinity that was destined to rot from within. The fall was precipitated by the Night of the Black Knives, a conspiracy that shattered the internal logic of the Golden Order. On this night, a group of Numen assassins stole a fragment of the Rune of Death and used it to slay Godwyn the Golden, Marika's firstborn and the most beloved of the demigods. Godwyn's death was a metaphysical anomaly. His soul was destroyed, but his body remained alive, becoming the first of the dead, and a source of spreading corruption known as Deathroot. This act broke Queen Marika's spirit, leading her to take a hammer to the Elden Ring itself. The lore suggests her act was one of both despair and rebellion, a desperate attempt to break the Greater Will's control over her world, even if it meant the world's destruction. The shattering of the ring was not a clean break. It sent shards, known as Great Runes, scattering into the hands of Marika's demigod children. These heirs, beings of immense power like Radon, Malenia, and Rykard, were immediately corrupted by the sudden influx of divine power. This led to the Shattering War, a period of apocalyptic conflict where the demigods fought for dominance, each hoping to claim the other's runes and become the next Elden Lord. However, the war ended in a stalemate. No single demigod proved strong enough to mend the ring, and the Greater will eventually abandon them, withdrawing its grace from the world and leaving the lands between to fester in a state of eternal, war-torn decay. The psychological atmosphere of this fall is one of stagnation. Because death has been removed from the cycle of nature, the inhabitants of the lands between cannot truly die. Common soldiers have become hollow husks, their minds withered by centuries of endless war. The noble houses have collapsed into madness, and the very land has begun to mutate. The Erdtree, once a beacon of golden light that fed the souls of the faithful, has become a silent, towering tomb. The Golden Era has been replaced by a Rust Era, where the physical laws of the world are broken beyond repair. Gravity is failing, the stars are frozen in place by General Radon's magic, and the outer edges of the continent are being consumed by scarlet rot. A central figure in this collapse is Runni the Witch, Marika's stepdaughter and the true architect of the Night of the Black Knives. Runni's lore is rooted in the concept of autonomy. She sought to free herself from the influence of the Two Fingers and the Greater Will, which had chosen her as a potential successor to Marika. To do this, she sacrificed her own flesh, casting aside her Empyrean body to live as a spirit within a four-armed doll. Her actions represent the cold logic of the fall. She believed that the Golden Order was a cage, and that the only way for the world to find a true future was to plunge it into a night of stars, free from the meddling of golden gods. The role of the Tarnished, the player's character, is introduced as the final, desperate variable in this equation. The Tarnished are the descendants of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, who was exiled from the lands between long ago. When the demigods failed to mend the ring, the Greater Will, or perhaps Marika herself, extended a long-lost call of grace to the dead across the fog. You are a dead who yet lives, a scavenger returning to a graveyard of gods. The lore of the Tarnished is the lore of the outsider. You arrive in a world that has already lost its soul, tasked with picking up the pieces of a crown that might no longer have a kingdom to rule. The first region you encounter, Limgrave, serves as the perfect visual metaphor for the fall. It is a place of haunting beauty, filled with the ruins of a civilization that was once grand. Giant stone coffins litter the fields, and the crucible knights of the old era wander the paths as aimless ghosts. The lore here establishes the hierarchy of ruin. The common people have become misbegotten, the knights have become blood-starved, and the demigods have hidden themselves in fortified legacy dungeons, clutching their great runes like children clutching broken toys. The world is not waiting to be saved. It is waiting for a conclusion. Part 1 concludes with the Tarnished standing before the gates of Stormvale Castle, the seat of Godric the Grafted. Godric represents the ultimate degradation of the golden lineage. He is a weak, desperate man who has resorted to grafting the limbs of warriors onto his own body to mimic the strength of his ancestors. He is the pathetic fall, the proof that the divinity of the Erdtree has run dry. As Link, or rather the Tarnished, prepares to cross the threshold, they realize that to mend the world, they must first kill the gods who broke it. The journey toward the Elden Ring is a journey through the heart of a corpse, searching for a spark of life in a world that forgot how to die. The descent into Liurnia of the Lakes represents the second stage of the world's collapse, shifting the focus from the martial decay of Limgrave to the intellectual and spiritual rot of the Carian royalty and the Academy of Raya Lucaria. Liurnia is a land defined by stagnation and submergence. It is a vast, shallow sea that was once a center of astrological study, now drowning in a perpetual, haunting mist. The lore of this region centers on the conflict between two opposing ideologies of the cosmos: the Golden Order, which worships the light of the Erdtree, and the Carian lineage, which looks to the stars and the moon for guidance. The fall of Liurnia was not caused by a single hammerstroke, but by a slow civilizational divorce that left the land's great thinkers trapped in a state of eternal, motionless study. At the heart of the lake stands the Academy of Raya Lucaria, a massive Gothic fortress of learning that has quite literally shut its gates to the dying world. The sorcerers of the Academy, known as the Glintstone Sorcerers, represent the isolation of the intellectual. When the Shattering began, the Academy declared neutrality, sealing their gates with magical glintstone keys and abandoning the rest of the lands between to its fate. However, this neutrality was a mask for internal collapse. The lore of glintstone is inherently parasitic. It is the amber of the cosmos, containing the residual life force of distant stars. By obsessing over this power, the sorcerers lost their humanity, some even transforming into graven masses, horrific spheres of stone made from the fused bodies of failed scholars. The tragic centerpiece of Liurnia's lore is Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon. Rennala was once a champion of the stars who unified the Academy and the Carian royal family through her immense magical prowess. Her story is one of heartbreak and regression. She fell in love with Radagon, a golden-haired champion of the Erdtree, in a union that was meant to heal the rift between the moon and the tree. However, when Radagon abruptly abandoned her to return to the capital and become the second Elden Lord, Rennala's mind shattered. She became a broken queen, obsessed with a gift Radagon left behind: the Amber Egg, which contains the great rune of the unborn. Now, she spends her eternity in the Grand Library, attempting to rebirth her scholars in a cycle of flawed, short-lived incarnations. This rebirth lore is a dark mirror to the Golden Order's eternity. While Marika's order prevents death, Rennala's magic attempts to force life where it no longer belongs. The student's Link, or the Tarnished, encounters in the library are sweetlings, fragile, crawling beings who cannot stand on their own and are constantly being recycled into new, equally broken forms. This represents the intellectual death of Liurnia. The pursuit of knowledge has been replaced by a desperate, maternal instinct to cling to a past that has already been destroyed. Rennala is not a villain, but a victim of the greater will's political machinations, serving as a living warning that even the most brilliant mind can be undone by the cruelty of gods. Surrounding the Academy is the Carian Manor, the ancestral home of the royalty, which has been overrun by hand spiders and spectral defenses. The lore here reveals the sheer paranoia of the falling world. The Carians, led in shadow by Runny the Witch, have turned their home into a death trap to ward off the influence of the Two Fingers. Here, the Tarnished learns of the Albinaurics, a man-made race created through forbidden primordial alchemy. The Albinaurics are the unwanted of the lands between. Because they were not born of the Erdtree, they are considered graceless and are systematically hunted and persecuted. Their presence in Liurnia, hiding in the dark corners of the lake, highlights the bigotry of the Golden Order, proving that the grace of the Erdtree was always an exclusive, judgmental light. The ecology of Liurnia itself has become a sunken archive. The craymen and the giant lobsters that stalk the shallows are mutations born from the polluted, glintstone-heavy waters. The lore of the time shift in this region is subtle. Unlike the stones in Lanayru, time in Liurnia is frozen by the stargazer magic of the Carians. Because General Radon, Renala's son, used his gravity magic to hold the stars in place, the fate of the Carian family has been literally paused. The stars, which govern the destiny of the moon worshippers, cannot move. This creates a world of beautiful paralysis. The mist never clears, the moon never sets, and the scholars never finish their scrolls. Liurnia is a dream that refuses to end, even as the dreamer's body rots beneath the waves. The arrival of the Tarnished in this region acts as the catalyst of movement. By breaking into the academy and confronting Renala, you are not just seeking a great rune. You are shattering the seal of neutrality that has kept Liurnia in stasis. The lore suggests that the second great rune, the Rune of the Unborn, is the key to adaptive evolution. It allows the Tarnished to respec their very soul, using Renala's tragic magic to perfect their own form. This is the irony of the fall. The Broken Queen provides the hero with the means to become stronger, even as she remains trapped in her library, clutching an egg that will never hatch into a true future. Part 2 concludes with the Tarnished standing on the rooftops of the academy, looking north toward the Altus Plateau. The mist of the lake is starting to give way to the golden hue of the Erdtree's heartland. But the journey through Liurnia has left a mark. You have seen that wisdom can be just as corrupting as power. You have seen a queen broken by love and a school of geniuses turned into stone. The fall of the lands between is gaining momentum. As you prepare to climb the grand lift of Dectus, you realize that the world is not just a battlefield. It is a complex web of broken families and discarded experiments, and the moon of Liurnia was just the first layer of the night you must traverse. The descent into Caelid represents the third and most visceral stage of the world's collapse, shifting from the stagnant mists of Liurnia to a landscape of absolute biological horror. Caelid is the wound of the world, a region defined by putrefaction and malice. This was once a land of red earth and proud fortifications, but it was transformed into a hellscape during the final, most brutal confrontation of the Shattering, the Battle of Ionia. The lore of this region centers on the unstoppable rot and the tragic stalemate between two of the most powerful demigods to ever live, General Radon and Maelnia the Severed. Their clash did not result in a victor, but in the total ecological death of the eastern continent, proving that when gods fight, the very soil pays the price. The lore of the Scarlet Rot is the core of Caelid's tragedy. The rot is not a natural disease. It is the influence of an outer god of corruption, channeled through Maelnia. During her duel with Radon, when she realized she could not defeat the Star Scourge through martial skill alone, she bloomed, releasing the rot in a cataclysmic explosion. The result was the Ionia Swamp, a churning sea of toxic sludge that serves as the epicenter of the infection. The lore explains that the rot is a form of stagnant life. It consumes everything it touches, reshaping flesh into fungal growths and turning the environment into a garden of gore. Caelid is what happens when the cycle of life and death is replaced by a cycle of infinite consumption. General Radon, once the mightiest of the demigods, remains in Caelid as a living monument of decay. Radon's lore is rooted in the concept of honor in madness. Despite being consumed by the rot from within, losing his mind, his feet, and his dignity, he continues to wander the Wailing Dunes. His gravity magic, which he learned in his youth to protect his beloved steed Leonard, remains active even in his mindless state. He is still holding back the stars, a feat of cosmic strength that prevents the fate of the Carian family from moving forward. The Radon Festival is a piece of grim lore. It is a recurring event where warriors from across the lands between gather to grant the general an honorable death. It is a celebration of a hero who has become a monster, a funeral that requires a small army to perform. The architecture of Caelid, specifically Celia, town of sorcery, provides a look at the lost history of the night. Celia was a sister city to the Academy of Raya Lucaria, focusing on the eternal night and the magic of the stars. However, the lore reveals that Sellia was also a city of assassins, hidden by veils of magic. Now, it is a ghost town inhabited by spectral sorcerers who continue to guard their secrets even as the rot melts the walls. The chair crypts of Sellia suggest a culture that viewed death not as a return to the Erdtree, but as a silent, seated vigil. The fall of Sellia signifies the extinction of the stars in the east. As the rot spread, the wisdom of the night was replaced by the screaming of the kindred of rot, insectoid worshippers who see the decay as a new form of divinity. The Redmane Castle and the soldiers who remain there represent the futility of duty. The Redmane soldiers are unique among the armies of the Shattering. They have not abandoned their post. They use fire to hold back the rot, creating walls of flame that act as a desperate, flickering barrier against the fungal tide. Their lore is one of permanent war. They are not fighting for a great rune or a new Elden Lord. They are fighting to keep the infection from reaching the rest of the world. This creates a tragic contrast to the Golden Order. While the capital lives in luxury, the soldiers of Caelid live in a charnel house, their armor rusted red and their lungs filled with spores, serving as the unsung guardians of a dying continent. The presence of the beast clergyman, Garank, in the isolated bestial sanctum adds a layer of primal regret to the region. Garank is the shadowbound beast of Queen Marika, tasked with consuming the death root that spread from Godwyn's corpse. His hunger is insatiable, and his presence in Caelid, the most rotten part of the world, is fitting. He represents the cannibalism of the Order. The Golden Order must consume its own failures to survive. The lore of the bestial sanctum tells us that even the highest servants of the Greater will have been cast out into the fringes, reduced to scavenging for death in a world that has officially outlawed it. For the Tarnished, Caelid is a test of sanity. It is the first region where the environment itself is a constant threat to your health. The lore suggests that to survive Caelid, one must possess a spirit of iron. By participating in the Radon Festival and defeating the Star Scourge, the Tarnished is not just claiming a great rune. They are restarting the cosmos. The death of Radon allows the stars to fall once more, shattering the stasis of Liurnia and opening the path to the eternal city of Nokron. This is the irony of the fall. You must kill the most heroic demigod left in the world to allow the world's destiny to continue. Radon was a pillar holding up a broken ceiling. By removing him, you allow the stars to crash down, for better or worse. Part 3 concludes with the Tarnished standing on the edge of the Wailing Dunes, watching a falling star streak across the red sky. The general is dead, the festival is over, and the rot continues to pulse in the earth. You have seen the ultimate cost of the demigod's ambition, a land turned into a tumor. The Golden Order feels like a distant memory here, replaced by the smell of sulfur and the sound of giant, mutated beasts. As you prepare to follow the path of the fallen star into the earth, you realize that the fall of the lands between is not just a political collapse, but a biological apocalypse, and the grace you follow is leading you deeper into the heart of the rot. The descent into the Siofra River and the Eternal Cities represents the fourth stage of the world's collapse, revealing the subterranean truth that lies beneath the roots of the Erdtree. This is a journey into the paleontology of divinity. While the surface of the lands between is defined by the gold of the sun, the underground is a realm of cold starlight and forgotten civilizations that predated the Golden Order. The lore of the Siofra and Ainsel rivers centers on the Nox, a race of people who were banished underground by the Greater Will in an ancient age. Their fall was not a result of the Shattering, but of a prehistoric rebellion. They sought to create a Lord of Night to rival the Elden Lord, and for this high treason, their cities were buried in the dark, forced to live under a false sky of shimmering magical stars. The architecture of Nokron and Noxtella is a testament to architectural defiance. The buildings are crafted from white stone and silver, reflecting the Nox's obsession with the moon and the Silver Tear. The lore of the Silver Tears is particularly significant. They are shape-shifting, liquid metal beings created through forbidden alchemy. The Nox were attempting to engineer a god, a mimic that could eventually take the throne. This reveals that the fall of the world is a recurring cycle. Every age attempts to create its own divine logic, and every age is eventually crushed or buried by the one that follows. The eternal cities are grave cities, preserved in a state of perfectly crafted silence, populated by mimic tears and the dragonkin soldiers, failed experiments who have never seen a real sun. The ancestral followers, the horned spirits who dwell in the Siofra woods, provide the lore of naturalistic life. They represent a primordial ecology that exists outside the grace of the Erdtree. They believe in the spirit glow and the cycle of death and rebirth that occurs through the budding of horns. Their presence suggests that the Erdtree's golden order is an artificial overlay on a world that already had its own ways of processing life and death. The ancestral spirit boss is a manifestation of this old way, a creature that grows stronger by absorbing the spirits of the dead. This highlights the theological conflict of the fall. The Golden Order tried to centralize life into one tree, but the underground proves that life is a sprawling, decentralized force that cannot be fully contained. Deep within the Einzel River lies the Lake of Rot, the primary source of the infection that ruined Caelid. The lore of this lake is the lore of the outer god of Rot. It is revealed that a blind swordsman, who once tutored Malnia, sealed the essence of this god beneath the earth eons ago. The lake is a massive, claustrophobic expanse of pink, bubbling liquid, guarded by the ancestors of the Rot, the pests who worship the decay. This underground reservoir is the underworld's wound. It proves that the fall of the lands between was not just a result of Marika's hammer, but of the leaking of the abyss. The barriers that kept the chaotic outer gods at bay have dissolved, allowing the Rot and the frenzy to seep into the foundations of the world. The eternal city of Nokron also houses the Fingers Layer blade, the hidden treasure that Runni the witch seeks. The lore of this blade is the ultimate evidence of the Noxus heresy. It is a weapon born from a corpse, capable of harming the greater will and its envoys. This connects the fall of the underground to the fall of the surface. Runni's Night of the Black Knives was the completion of the Nox's ancient plan. By descending into the well, the Tarnished is essentially picking up the thread of a rebellion that was started thousands of years ago. You are not just a warrior, you are an archaeologist of sedition, uncovering the weapons that the Golden Order tried to hide in the dark. The dragonkin soldiers of Noxtella add a layer of biological melancholy. These massive, crawling giants are mimics of the ancient dragons. They were born in the dark and have never known the sky. They crawl like humans and use frozen lightning because they lack the true, gold-tinged lightning of the sunlit dragons. They represent the frustration of the mimic. Everything in the underground is a copy of something above, a desperate attempt by the banished Nox to recreate the beauty they lost. The fall of the underground is defined by this aesthetic mourning, the creation of a world that is beautiful to look at but lacks the life fire of the Erdtree. For the Tarnished, the underground is the subconscious of the lands between. It is where the world's secrets are buried and where the consequences of Marika's reign are most visible. By navigating the rivers and defeating the regal ancestor spirit, the Tarnished gains a perspective that the surface dwellers lack. You see that the Eternal Order is built on top of a graveyard of earlier, equally valid orders. The lore suggests that the falling star beasts and the Estelle, natural born of the void, were sent by the greater will as celestial punishments to destroy these cities. This introduces the concept of divine cruelty. The gods do not just win, they erase. Part 4 concludes with the Tarnished reaching the Grand Cloister at the edge of the Lake of Rot. You are standing in the lowest point of the world, surrounded by the literal bones of the earth. The path forward leads to Estelle, a cosmic horror that represents the void that exists beyond the stars. You have moved from the red rot of the surface to the silver treason of the deep. The fall of the lands between is no longer just a story of a broken ring. It is a story of a world being hunted by the stars and rotting from the center. As you prepare to enter the coffin that will carry you to the depths of the abyss, you realize that the grace you follow is not a light of salvation, but a guide into the deepest shadows of history. The ascent to the Altus Plateau represents the fifth stage of the world's collapse, marking the transition from the edges of ruin to the heart of the Order. This region is defined by golden decadence. It is a high, sun-drenched plain where the grass is permanently turned to gold by the proximity of the Erdtree. However, the lore of Altus is centered on the concept of a gilded sepulchre. While it appears majestic from a distance, the plateau is a place of absolute mourning and stagnant military might. The Great Lift of Dectus or the treacherous ruin-strewn precipice lead Link, or the Tarnished, into a world where the air is thick with the scent of burning wood and ancient incense. The fall of Altus was not a sudden explosion, but a slow realization that the gleam of gold no longer held any warmth. The architecture of the plateau is dominated by the capital city, Leyndell, a massive, sprawling metropolis that serves as the tomb of the Golden Order. Leyndell is a city frozen in a state of eternal siege. Its walls are scarred by the massive, petrified corpse of the ancient dragon Gransax, whose spear remains lodged in the city's heart as a monument to the war that almost ended the Erdtree's reign. The lore of the dragon cult in Leyndell is a significant piece of social history. It shows that the Golden Order was once flexible enough to absorb its enemies, turning the dragons into worshipped saints. However, in the wake of the Shattering, this flexibility has vanished. The city is now a labyrinth of barricades and perfumers, once healers, now chemical warriors who use toxic dust to preserve the city's purity at the cost of its citizens' lives. At the center of the capital sits the Elden throne, guarded by Morgott, the Omen King. Morgott's lore is the most tragic and noble of the demigods. He is a veiled monarch, an omen born with horns and cursed blood, who was discarded into the sewers at birth. Despite being rejected by his mother, Marika, and the Golden Order, Morgott became its most loyal defender during the Shattering. He represents the paradox of devotion. He loves a world that hates him. While his siblings fought for great runes to satisfy their ego, Morgott stayed behind to protect the tree that never loved him. He views the other demigods as pillaging traitors, and his reign is a desperate attempt to keep the seat of power warm for a god that has already fled. The Omen lore provides a dark look at the spirit vomit of the lands between. Omens are beings born with chaotic, tangled horns, believed to be a defilement of the Erdtree. However, the lore suggests that the Omens are actually a throwback to the Crucible, the primordial form of the Erdtree where all life was once blended together. The Golden Order's rejection of the Omens is a rejection of its own origins. By hunting and dehorning Omen children, the Order was effectively trying to cut away its own roots. This biological hypocrisy is a key driver of the world's fall. The more the Order tried to be pure gold, the more it became brittle and prone to shattering. The presence of the Godskin Apostles in the windmill village of Dominula adds a layer of ceremonial horror to the plateau. These figures are the remnants of a cult that once hunted the gods themselves, seeking to skin them to wear their divinity. The lore of Dominula is a disturbing display of maddened festivity. The villagers dance in a trance, celebrating a harvest of flesh. This reveals that in the absence of the Elden Lord, the common people have turned to ancient, darker religions to find meaning in the apocalypse. The Golden Order has failed to provide for the souls of the people, leaving them to the mercy of the Black Flame and the god-slaying ambitions of a forgotten age. The Mt. Gelmir region, a volcanic extension of the plateau, houses the Volcano Manor and the demigod Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy. Rykard's lore is the lore of divine cannibalism. Disgusted by the greater will, Rykard allowed himself to be swallowed by a great serpent so that he could devour the other gods and live forever. This is the ultimate descent into gluttony. The manor is a site of recruitment for recusants, tarnished who hunt their own kind. It represents the self-destruction of the hero. In a world without a king, the strongest have turned into predators, eating the very world they were meant to save. Rykard's great rune is soaked in blood, emphasizing that power without order leads only to the stomach of a snake. For the Tarnished, the Altus Plateau is the point of no return. It is here that you realize the Erdtree is closed. When you finally reach the entrance to the tree, you find it barred by a wall of thorns of rejection. This is the ultimate piece of environmental storytelling. The god of the world has locked the door and refused to let anyone in. The lore suggests that the greater will has simply given up on the world. By realizing this, the Tarnished is forced to look for a sinful solution, the burning of the Erdtree. This marks the transition from being a seeker of grace to being a lord of chaos or a prophet of a new age. You are no longer following a path. You are forging a trail through the ruins of a religion. Part 5 concludes with the Tarnished standing on the divine bridge in Leyndell, looking up at the towering, impenetrable Erdtree. The city below is silent. The Omen King has been defeated, and the throne is empty. You have seen the heights of the world and found them wanting. You have seen the purity of the capital and found it built on the blood of the omens. The fall of the lands between has reached its zenith. As you look toward the frozen peaks of the mountaintops of the giants, you realize that to mend the world, you must first commit the cardinal sin. You must set the gold on fire to see what lies beneath the ash. The ascent to the mountaintops of the giants represents the 6th stage of the world's collapse, shifting the narrative from the gilded rod of the capital to a landscape of frozen silence and genocide. This region is the graveyard of the old world, a high-altitude wasteland where the air is thin and the sun is blocked by a perpetual, biting blizzard. The lore of the mountaintops is centered on the war against the giants, the very first conflict of Queen Marika's reign. Long before the Shattering, the Golden Order sought to eliminate the only power capable of harming the Erdtree, the Flame of Ruin. This was not a war of territory, but a preemptive strike against a cosmic threat. The result was the near extinction of a race and the birth of a frozen curse that lingers in the ice. The architecture of the region is defined by the chain bridges and the massive, rusted kills of the Forge of the Giants. These structures are remnants of a titanic industry. The lore suggests that the giants were the original keepers of the world's fire, serving a god known as the Fell God. When Marika's forces, led by Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, arrived on these peaks, they did not just kill the giants. They desecrated their culture. The landscape is littered with the frozen, twisted corpses of these colossal beings, their bodies preserved by the cold in the exact moments of their death. This is the price of the Golden Order. The Age of Plenty was bought with the blood of a civilization that was simply too large and too hot for the Erdtree to tolerate. The tragic centerpiece of this lore is the Fire Giant, the sole survivor of the genocide. He was not spared out of mercy, but out of a cruel necessity. Queen Marika cursed him to guard the forge for eternity, ensuring that the flame of ruin would never be used, but also never extinguished. The Fire Giant represents the mourning of a race. He is a being of immense sorrow, tending to a fire that is the only thing left of his people. His biology is intrinsically tied to the Fell God. He has a second face on his stomach, a literal eye to the divine fire. His defeat at the hands of the Tarnished is an act of euthanasia. By ending his life, you are not just clearing a path. You are finally allowing the Giant's age to truly die so that a new era can be born from the ash. The shunning grounds and the path to the consecrated snowfield reveal the lore of the hidden exodus. Not everyone in the lands between accepted the Golden Order's hegemony. The snowfield is a sanctuary for the Albinaurics and the misbegotten, the graceless, who fled the persecution of Leyndell. Here, the lore of Miquella the Unalloyed comes to the forefront. Miquella, Marika's son, grew disillusioned with the Golden Order because it could not cure his sister's rot or his own eternal childhood. He sought to create a new Erdtree, a sanctuary where all, regardless of their purity, could live in peace. The lore of the Erdtree is the lore of failed hope. It is a beautiful, spiraling city built into the branches of a rotting tree, a utopia of the damned that was ultimately abandoned when Miquella was kidnapped by Mog. The presence of the Zamora hero and the spectral knights in the Castle Sol adds a layer of spiritual desperation. Castle Sol was a site dedicated to a soulless sun, where followers tried to trigger an eclipse to revive the soulless demigods, specifically Godwyn. Their failure reinforces the finality of the fall. In the mountaintops, the magic of the sun and the stars feels distant and weak. This is a land of nihilism. Even the fire monks, who were originally sent to guard the flame, have become obsessed with it, turning into a cult that worships the very thing they were meant to suppress. This shows that in a world without a king, Even the most disciplined order eventually descends into idolatry of the void. The Forge of the Giants is the kiln of fate. The lore establishes that to burn the Erdtree, one must offer a kindling. This introduces the tragic role of Melina, the Tarnished's maiden. Melina's lore is one of purpose through sacrifice. She was born at the foot of the Erdtree and given the mission to serve as kindling for the fire. This choice, to set the world on fire to save it from stagnation, is the ultimate sin in the eyes of the greater will. It signifies the self-immolation of the order. To fix the ring, the Tarnished must destroy the very tree that housed it. This is the central paradox of the fall. The only way to mend is to first burn. For the Tarnished, the mountaintops are the peak of isolation. You are farther from the Erdtree than ever before, yet its shadow still looms over the horizon. The lore suggests that this is where the Tarnished truly becomes a lord. You are no longer just collecting runes. You are making a cosmic decision that will affect the destiny of every living soul. By igniting the forge, you are breaking the stasis of gold and inviting the black flame of death back into the world. This is the moment the fall becomes an end. The golden leaves of the Erdtree begin to turn to ash, and the sky becomes a bruised red, signaling that the time of the gods is over. Part 6 concludes with the Tarnished standing at the rim of the forge as the flames begin to roar. The world below is about to change forever. You have survived the giants, the snow, and the shadows of Castle Sol. You have seen the old fire and the new ash. The fall of the lands between has reached its point of no return. As the screen fades to white with the transition to crumbling Farum Azula, you realize that the grace you followed was always leading to this. The destruction of the old world to make room for a dream that might never come true. The forge is hot, the tree is burning, and the end is finally in sight. The ascent to crumbling Farum Azula represents the 7th stage of the world's collapse, taking the narrative into a realm of temporal instability and prehistoric ruin. This is a city suspended in the eye of a perpetual, cosmic storm, drifting far above the ocean and outside the normal flow of time. The lore of Farum Azula reveals the First Order, the civilization of the ancient dragons that ruled the lands between long before the Erdtree even existed. This stage of the fall is centered on the concept of entropic stagnation. Farum Azula is a mausoleum of wind and stone, where the architecture is literally dissolving into the sky. It serves as a grim reminder that even the most powerful, diamond-skinned gods are eventually eroded by the relentless passage of eons. The architecture of the city is defined by gargantuan scale and brutalist elegance. The structures are made of a gray, weather-beaten stone that predates the golden marble of Leyndell. The lore suggests that this city was once the seat of the dragon lord Placidusax, the first Elden lord of an era whose god has long since fled. Unlike the Golden Order, which sought to control life through the Erdtree, the Dragon Order was based on the stone and the storm. The presence of the beastmen of Farum Azula, primitive, five-fingered creatures who were granted intelligence by the dragons, highlights the origins of sapience. The dragons were the first to bring order to the primal chaos of the world, and Farum Azula is the dying echo of that original peace, a place where the wind screams through the ribs of a prehistoric god. The tragic centerpiece of this lore is Malekith, the Black Blade. Malekith is Queen Marika's shadow-bound beast, the guardian of the Rune of Death. His story is one of eternal penance. After the fragment of the rune was stolen on the Night of the Black Knives, Malekith bound the remaining blade into his own flesh to ensure it could never be stolen again. He disguises himself as the beast clergyman Geraint, consumed by a hunger for deathroot that can never be sated. Malekith represents the fear of the end. Marika used him to remove death from the world, but in doing so, she turned her most loyal servant into a pariah. His defeat at the hands of the Tarnished is the key to the apocalypse. By slaying him, you release destined death back into the lands between, allowing the Erdtree to finally burn. The presence of the Godskin duo in the Dragon Temple adds a layer of predatory opportunism to the ruins. These cultists of the Gloom-Eyed Queen have traveled to this timeless place to scavenge the power of the Black Flame. The lore of the Godslayers is intrinsically linked to Farum Azula. Before Marika rose to power, The gloom-eyed queen was an Empyrean who wielded the power of death. Her defeat by Malekith led to the sealing of the Rune of Death and the beginning of the Golden Order. By fighting the Godskins here, the Tarnished is witnessing the clash of lost eras. The ancient enemies of the Erdtree are gathering at the world's end, sensing that the seal on death is finally thinning. The ancient dragons, such as Lanciax and Fortisax, provide the lore of divine fellowship. During the war against the dragons, the Golden Order eventually made peace with these titans, leading to the creation of the dragon cult in the capital. However, the dragons in Farum Azula are different. They are unalloyed, still wielding the red lightning of the primordial storm. Their lore is one of fading majesty. They are the last of their kind, guarding a city that is already gone. The fact that they are crumbling into gravel as they fight shows that their immortality was a lie. Like the Erdtree that followed them, the Dragon Order was a temporary stabilization of a chaotic universe, and Farum Azula is the dust that remains when the stabilization fails. The Dragon Lord Placidusax himself sits at the center of the storm, tucked away in a pocket of time where he awaits the return of his god. His lore is the ultimate example of cosmic abandonment. He has 2 heads, once 4, and his body is riddled with wounds from ancient wars. He represents the wait for a savior who never comes. The fall of the lands between is mirrored in his broken body. He is the skeleton of an era that refused to admit it was over. By defeating him, the Tarnished is not just conquering a boss, but is silencing the last heartbeat of the prehistoric world. This allows the timeline to finally move forward into the Age of Ash that the burning Erdtree demands. For the Tarnished, Farum Azula is the crucible of fate. It is here that you prove you are strong enough to handle the Rune of Death. The lore suggests that only a true lord can walk through the storm and emerge with the power to kill a god. By reclaiming the rune, you are committing to the total reset of reality. You are no longer just mending a ring. You are reintroducing the concept of an ending to a world that has been rotting for centuries because it was forbidden to die. This is the greatest mercy and the greatest sin combined into one act. The grace that guided you here is now a red-tinged light of execution, leading you toward the final confrontation at the base of the burning tree. Part 7 concludes with the cinematic transformation of the world. As Malekith falls and the Rune of Death is released, the red rune streaks across the sky and strikes the Erdtree in the distance. The golden leaves are replaced by a crimson blaze, and the capital city of Leyndell is buried in a mountain of ash. The fall of the lands between has reached its catastrophic conclusion. You have survived the storm outside of time and are now being transported back to a world that has been fundamentally changed. As you wake up in the Ashen capital, you realize that the world you knew is gone. The era of the demigods is over, the era of the Erdtree is burning, and the throne is waiting for a new king to sit upon a pile of cinders. The return to the Ashen capital represents the 8th stage of the world's collapse, serving as the funeral of the Golden Order. When the Tarnished wakes upon the dunes of grey soot, the Leyndell they once knew, a city of shimmering gold and soaring towers, has been erased. It is now a necropolis of cinders, buried under a mountain of ash produced by the burning Erdtree. The lore of the Ashen capital is centered on the concept of irreversible loss. This is the final physical manifestation of the fall. The Age of Plenty has literally turned to dust, covering the streets, the corpses of the citizens, and the broken dreams of the demigods in a uniform, colorless shroud. The air is no longer filled with the scent of incense, but with the dry, choking heat of a dying divinity. The architecture of the city has been reduced to skeletonized ruins. Only the highest spires of the capital peek out from the drifts of ash, creating a surreal, alien landscape. The lore of the ash suggests that the Erdtree's physical form was never truly solid. It was a projection of light and grace that, once ignited by the flame of ruin, left behind only the residue of its own consumption. This is the entropy of the sacred. The city has become a void, where the only remaining inhabitants are those too stubborn or too broken to leave. The presence of the Sir Gideon Ofnir, the all-knowing, as your first obstacle here highlights the betrayal of knowledge. Gideon, who spent his life seeking the truth of the demigods, has realized that a Tarnished cannot become a lord. because Marika wants the world to continue its struggle forever. The tragic centerpiece of this stage is the return of Hoare-Lu warrior, also known as Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. Godfrey's lore is a cycle of exile and return. He was the one who first conquered the lands between for Marika, only to have his grace stripped away when his war was over, becoming the first Tarnished. His return to the foot of the Erdtree is an act of paternal grief. He stands over the body of his son, Morgott, and treats him with the tenderness the world never gave him. Godfrey represents the pure strength of the old world. Unlike the demigods who relied on great runes and magic, Godfrey fights with the raw, primal power of a barbarian king. His battle is a duel of two lords, a clash between the past and the future to see who is worthy of mending the broken world. Godfrey's transformation into Hoare-Lu mid-battle is a pivotal piece of lore. He kills his own serpent regent, Siraj, the beast he grafted onto his back to suppress his bloodlust. This act signifies the rejection of civility. To stop the Tarnished, the first Elden Lord must become the chieftain of the Badlands once again, shedding the title of Lord to embrace his true, violent nature. This mirrors the state of the world. The Golden Order was just a veneer of grace covering a world of primal violence. By defeating him, the Tarnished is not just overcoming a warrior, but is effectively surpassing the Father. You have proven that the age of the First Lord is truly over, and that the mantle of destiny has passed to the last Tarnished. The Elden Throne, now a scorched seat in the shadow of the burning tree, provides the lore of divine vacancy. The chair is empty, and the Omen King who once guarded it is gone. This highlights the futility of the throne. Throughout the game, the throne was the ultimate goal, the symbol of absolute power. But in the Ashen Capital, it is revealed to be just a piece of stone in a room filled with smoke. The order that everyone fought for has been hollowed out. The lore suggests that Marika's plan was never for someone to rule, in the traditional sense, but for someone to break the cage she created. The throne is not a prize. It is a burden, a place where the next king must decide how to handle the death that has finally returned to the world. The presence of the Enya, the finger reader, now dead in the Round Table hold, adds a layer of theological silence. The two fingers have gone silent, and their interpreters have withered away. This represents the departure of the greater will. The outer god that governed the world has turned its gaze elsewhere, leaving the lands between to its own devices. The grace that guided you is now nothing more than a flickering spark. The fall of the lands between is complete because the law itself has vanished. You are standing in a world without a script, where your next steps will define the logic of the next several thousand years. For the Tarnished, the Ashen Capital is the threshold of godhood. You have walked through the fire and the storm, and you have defeated the first king. The lore suggests that you are now more than Tarnished. You have become a force of nature. By crossing the final fog gate into the heart of the Erdtree, you are entering the womb of the world. You are no longer fighting for survival. You are fighting for the right to dream. You carry the ashes of the old world on your cloak and the destined death of a god in your blade. The fall has cleared away the clutter of the demigods, leaving only you and the source of all things. Part 8 concludes with the Tarnished standing before the entrance to the Erdtree's inner sanctum. The golden bark is charred, and the light within is a blinding, flickering white. The first Elden Lord has fallen, the all-knowing has been silenced, and the ash is still falling like snow. You are about to step into the presence of Radagon and the Elden Beast. The fall of the lands between is reaching its absolute point of origin. As you prepare to enter the light, you realize that the order you seek to mend is not a thing of gold, but a thing of blood and spirit, and the end is only a few steps away. The entrance into the inner sanctum of the Erdtree represents the ninth and penultimate stage of the world's collapse, taking the narrative into the metaphysical heart of the universe. Within the tree, the physical laws of the lands between cease to exist, replaced by a void of shimmering light and the skeletal remains of a cosmic structure. The lore of this sanctum is centered on the absolute duality of the divine. Here, the Tarnished finally encounters the shattered vessel of the Elden Ring, Queen Marika the Eternal. However, The revelation that follows is the most significant piece of lore in the series. As the body of Marika falls from its suspension, it transforms, its hair turning from gold to red, becoming Radagon of the Golden Order. This confirms the secret. Radagon is Marika. They are two souls sharing a single, crumbling body, representing a godhood that has literally torn itself apart. The lore of Radagon is rooted in the concept of unwavering orthodoxy. While Marika was the one who shattered the Elden Ring in an act of rebellion or despair, Radagon was the one who attempted to repair it. He is the Leal Hound of the Golden Order, a manifestation of the Greater Will's desire for control and permanence. His battle against the Tarnished is a silent, brutal struggle. He does not speak, for he has no will left other than the enforcement of the Order's laws. He wields the same hammer Marika used to break the world, but he uses it to strike with the power of the Golden Order's logic. This fight represents the clash of wills, the old law of Radagon attempting to crush the new hero who has come to change the world. The tragedy of the Marika Radagon entity is the lore of divine entrapment. They are a god house divided against itself. Marika's desire for the end of the Order and Radagon's desire for the continuity of the Order have resulted in a state of infinite stagnation. By defeating Radagon, the Tarnished is not just winning a duel. You are killing the past. You are ending the internal war of a god that could no longer decide what the world should be. As Radagon falls, his body is consumed by a greater, more primordial force, leading to the final revelation of the series, the Elden Beast. This creature is the true form of the Elden Ring, a vassal of the Greater Will sent from the stars eons ago to impose its logic upon the world. The lore of the Elden Beast is the lore of cosmic parasitism. The beast is not a living thing in the biological sense. It is a manifestation of order itself, an alien god that has used the Erdtree as a host to drain the life force of the lands between. The battlefield becomes an endless, celestial ocean under a sky of infinite Erdtrees, suggesting that the Golden Order is just one of many experiments conducted by the Greater Will across the universe. This reveals the insignificance of the mortal. The wars, the demigods, and the suffering of the Tarnished were all merely noise to this cosmic entity. The Elden Beast represents the cold majesty of the stars, a god that is beautiful, alien, and utterly indifferent to human life. The biology of the Elden Beast, a translucent, multi-winged creature with a nervous system made of stars, symbolizes the totalitarian nature of grace. It fights with beams of light and Elden stars, turning the very concept of sacredness into a weapon of mass destruction. The lore suggests that by fighting the beast, the Tarnished is committing the ultimate high treason. You are attempting to slay the very concept of the law. This is the fall of the lands between reaching its logical conclusion. To save the world must be freed from the god that defines it. You are fighting to take the power of the ring back from the heavens and return it to the earth, or to the stars, or to the flames. The presence of the fractured Marika after the battle, a headless, stone-like husk, is the lore of the empty vessel. Once the Elden Beast is defeated, the divinity is gone. What remains is a broken tool. This highlights the price of eternity. Marika sought to live forever and rule forever, but she ended as a shattered statue in a void. The grace that guided you here was her final, desperate gamble to find someone strong enough to end her suffering and the suffering of her world. The fall has stripped away the gold, the flesh, and the ego, leaving only a decision. The Tarnished stands before the fragments of the Elden Ring, holding the power to define the next age. For the Tarnished, this moment is the zenith of autonomy. Throughout the journey, you were a pawn of grace, a candidate for lordship, or a recusant of the manor. But in the heart of the Erdtree, you are simply a will. The lore suggests that the mending of the ring is not just a repair job. It is a recoding of reality. Depending on the great runes you have collected, the mending rune of the Death Prince, the Fell Curse, or the Perfect Order, you will determine if the next age is one of compassionate death, infinite defilement, or cold logic. The fall has cleared the slate, and your hand is the one that will write the first word of the new world. Part 9 concludes with the Tarnished standing before the shattered remains of Marika, the pieces of the Elden ring floating in the air like shards of glass. The Elden beast has been silenced, and the Golden Order is officially dead. The silence within the Erdtree is absolute. You have reached the end of the fall. Everything that follows, the choice of the ending, is the birth of a new myth. As you reach out to touch the fragments of the ring, you realize that the grace was never about a king, but about the freedom to choose. The world is broken, the tree is ash, and the throne is waiting. The fall of the lands between is over. The age of the Tarnished is about to begin. The 10th and final stage of the world's collapse is the conclusion of the cycle, where the Tarnished must choose the logic that will govern the next era. The fall of the lands between has reached its absolute end. The demigods are dead, the outer gods have been repelled, and the Elden Ring lies shattered before you. The lore of the 6 endings represents the ultimate philosophical crossroads of the series. Every action you have taken, every friend you saved, every rune you claimed has been a vote for a different version of reality. This is the stage of reconstruction through choice. The fall was an act of destruction, but the ending is an act of creation. The Tarnished is no longer a scavenger. They are the architect of a new universe, tasked with deciding if the world should return to a modified gold, sink into a cold night, or burn until everything is equal in ash. The Age of Fracture is the default lore of the ending, where the Tarnished mends the Elden Ring without any additional runes. This represents the cynicism of the status quo. You sit upon the throne as Elden Lord, but the fundamental flaws of the Golden Order, the lack of death and the stagnation of the soul, remain. The lore suggests that this is a temporary peace. You have replaced Radagon, but you have not fixed the broken machine of the world. The Erdtree remains a charred skeleton, and the lands between continue to exist in a state of twilight. This ending serves as a warning. To simply mend what is broken without changing its nature is to invite the same fall to happen all over again in a few thousand years. In contrast, the mending runes offer the lore of theological reformation. If the Tarnished uses the rune of the Death Prince, they introduce the Age of the Duskborn, where the concept of life within death is legalized. This is the ultimate mercy of the grave. It ends the persecution of those who live in death and allows the cycle of Godwin's corruption to become a natural part of the world's logic. Conversely, the Rune of Perfect Order, Goldmask's quest, seeks to remove the fickleness of the gods from the equation entirely. This is the lore of divine determinism. It creates a world of absolute, unchangeable law where neither Marika nor any future lord can ever interfere with the ring again. It is a perfect world, but one that is cold, rigid, and entirely devoid of human emotion or change. The Age of the Stars, the ending of Runni the Witch, is the most radical departure from the Golden Order. This is the lore of cosmic autonomy. Runni does not seek to mend the ring or sit on a throne. She seeks to take the ring and leave. She carries the divinity into the cold night of the stars, removing the god from the physical world entirely. This ending represents the great divorce. By taking the light away, Runni allows the inhabitants of the lands between to live, suffer, and die without the meddling of outer gods. It is an age of loneliness, but also an age of freedom. The lore of the moon suggests that while the night is cold and dark, it is the only place where a soul can truly belong to itself, free from the golden grace that was always a gilded cage. On the darkest end of the spectrum lies the Lord of Frenzied Flame. This is the lore of total nihilism. Driven by the 3 fingers, the Tarnished decides that the world was a mistake from the beginning. Every soul, every mountain, and every memory is consumed by the yellow flame of frenzy until all is one in a sea of fire. This is the final fall. It is the belief that life is synonymous with suffering, and therefore, the only mercy is the total erasure of existence. In this ending, the Tarnished becomes the Lord of Chaos, standing in a world of ash and fire, watching the Erdtree melt into the sky. It is the only ending where the fall is never ending, a permanent state of destruction that leaves nothing behind for a future to grow. The blessing of despair, the Dung Eater's ending, provides the lore of universal defilement. By using the mending rune of the fell curse, the Tarnished ensures that every child born in the next age will be an omen, cursed and reviled. This is the equality of the damned. If everyone is cursed, then no one is cursed. It is a spiteful, horrific order that punishes the world for the bigotry of the Golden Order. It represents the revenge of the discarded. The fall has led to a world where the only way to find peace is to make the defilement the new standard of purity. It is a grim, suffocating conclusion that reflects the deepest bitterness of the lands between's history. The legacy of the Tarnished in these endings is the lore of the ultimate variable. You began as a person of no renown, a literal corpse in a chapel. Your journey was an ascent from the grave. The lore suggests that the grace was a tool used by Marika to find someone with a will strong enough to actually make a choice. Whether you choose to be a restorer, a rebel, or a destroyer, you have proven that the human spirit, even in its tarnished form, is the only thing capable of ending the stagnation of the gods. The fall of the lands between was a tragedy caused by the gods, but the resolution is a comedy or a drama authored entirely by a mortal. Part 10 concludes with a view of the Erdtree from the shores of Limgrave. In most endings, the tree is either silent, gone, or burning. The grace in the eyes of the people has faded, replaced by the natural light of the sun or the cold light of the moon. The legend of Queen Marika has ended, and the history of the next age has begun. The lands between remain a scarred, beautiful, and dangerous place, but the clock of fate has finally been restarted. You are the Elden Lord, or the consort of the stars, or the king of the ash. The fall is over. What remains is a world that is finally, for the first time in an eternity, allowed to grow old. The final layer of the world's collapse is defined by the perspective of the witness, an exploration of the metalore of the Tarnished as a disruptor of divine narrative. In the Elden Ring mythos, your viewpoint is the only one that remains objective in a world blinded by ancient faith and religious frenzy. This stage is defined by the sovereign gaze. Throughout the journey, the Tarnished is the only being who truly sees the lands between as a whole, from the highest peaks of the giants to the deepest rot of the roots. This bird's-eye view of history allows for a unique philosophical conclusion: the realization that the Golden Order was not a natural state of the world, but a forced perspective imposed by an alien entity. Your viewpoint is the lens of truth that finally shatters the stained glass of Marika's propaganda. The lore of your viewpoint is anchored in the concept of the unbound will. Every other character in the game is tethered to a master or a destiny. Morgott to the tree, Blade to Runni, and the finger readers to the greater will. As a Tarnished, your lack of a proper place in the hierarchy is actually your greatest power. You possess a secular agency that the demigods lack. This is why your viewpoint is so dangerous to the status quo. You are a variable that cannot be calculated by the all-knowing Gideon or the Order of Radagon. Your perspective represents the secularization of the divine. By looking at a god and seeing only a boss to be defeated, you strip the Golden Order of its mystique and reduce the cosmic conflict to a matter of personal resolve. Your viewpoint also provides the lore of environmental empathy. While the demigods saw the regions of Caelid, Liurnia, and Altus as strategic territories to be conquered, the Tarnished experiences them as a survivor. You feel the sting of the frost, the burn of the rot, and the crushing weight of the gravity magic. This physicality of knowledge creates a lore of shared suffering. By the time you reach the Elden Throne, your viewpoint is seasoned by the struggles of the common folk you met along the way. BOC the Seamster, Iron Fist Alexander, and Millicent. You are a king of the people because you have walked in the dirt with them. This perspective ensures that whatever age you choose, it is informed by the reality of the lowly rather than the ego of the highborn. The memory of the journey is the most potent weapon in the Tarnished's arsenal. The lore suggests that the grace you follow is actually a record of Marika's own regrets, playing out in reverse. By following the trail of the sites of grace, your viewpoint acts as a history reclaimer. You are the only person in the world who understands the full chain of causality. How the removal of the Rune of Death led to the Night of the Black Knives, which led to the Shattering and finally to the Ash. This total awareness is what makes you worthy of the throne. A lord must understand the mistakes of the past to avoid repeating them in the future. Your viewpoint is the corrective eye of history, ensuring that the fall actually leads somewhere new. Finally, your viewpoint represents the end of the spectator. For centuries, the people of the lands between sat and watched as their world rotted, waiting for a savior or a sign from the two fingers. By stepping into the arena, you have ended the age of waiting. The lore of the Tarnished is the lore of the active participant. You have transformed the world from a fixed text into a living choice. This is the ultimate lordly perspective. The realization that the world does not belong to the stars, the tree, or the gods. It belongs to those who are willing to bleed for its future. Your viewpoint is the light that remains when the golden grace finally flickers out. A steady, human flame in a world of cosmic shadows. This chronicle concludes with a look at the legacy of the player. Beyond the game's internal logic, your viewpoint is the soul of the world. Without your intervention, the lands between would have remained in a state of eternal, stagnant decay. You are the great catalyst. Whether you brought about an age of stars or a lord of frenzied flame, you provided the world with the one thing it lacked: an ending. The fall of the lands between is finally complete because you were there to witness it, to record it, and to finally, mercifully turn the page. The ash has settled, the gods are silent, and the viewpoint of the Tarnished is now the only one that matters.